Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Marie and today we are talking about Shein. I have made so many videos about fast fashion brands, about Shein, about Temu, and we're not done because more and more consumers are choosing to buy from these platforms, so I'll continue to talk about them. Today I specifically want to zoom in on what happens when greenwashing works. I have talked about greenwashing many times on this channel. I will leave down below a link for my greenwashing series where I go over different examples of greenwashing, how you can spot it, how you can avoid it, and how generally to analyze and interpret any kind of content that comes from brands and companies, also like Shein. But today I want to talk about what happens when these kind of tactics end up working, because in 2023, last year, there was a study, a survey done by The New Consumer that showed that the average Shein shopper thinks of themselves as being more environmentally conscious than the average consumer. I'm talking about this now because Common Earth made an Instagram post yesterday about this and I've already been tagged in it many times, so I thought I wanted to talk about it. I also made a reel, but then I decided, you know what, let's sit down, have a chat, because this is actually really interesting. Here's what that survey found. This 2023 survey found that 52% of Shein shoppers thought of themselves as being more environmentally conscious than the average consumer. And what's really interesting here is that that's 5% higher than the overall respondents. The survey also found that 67% of Shein shoppers would be willing to pay more for a product if it was environmentally conscious. And something just seems a little bit off here. I don't know if you can tell what that could be. Something is not clicking. It seems like there is a disconnect between consumers that are buying from these platforms and companies and what they actually think or feel or how they see themselves as a consumer. And to me, that's a sign that the greenwashing tactics of brands like Shein is actually working, even though they're quite basic in their forms of greenwashing. They are not inventing the wheel in any capacity here. They are basically checking all the boxes for very basic, classic examples of greenwashing. But it seems to be working. I think this is telling because what it shows us is that how easy it is to manipulate and mislead consumers based on the most basic misdirections. Okay, but let's look at what Shein is actually saying about sustainability. I have been looking forward to this for so long. I have looked at some of the websites before in the greenwashing series, but let's see if there's been any updates here, because I got the website here. This probably means that I will be getting so many ads from Shein from now on. Not that I don't get ads from Shein already. I don't know what's happening. Also, if you see a Shein ad before this video, comment down below. I love when you guys do this. It's so erotic, it almost hurts. But alas. And we're starting off strong with our impact. And there is a brilliant quote from their CEO. "Everyone deserves a more equitable and sustainable future. And I'm confident that Shein can become a catalyst for that transition." How? This everyone is so incredibly telling, because when we talk about everyone having access to cheap and trendy clothing, everyone having access to the newest trends and styles, the everyone that tends to be left out of this conversation is the everyone that makes these clothes, because the working conditions for Shein is absolutely horrendous and there's been several exposés about that. I really recommend looking into the work of Public Eye because they have done a lot of interviews with garment workers that are working within the supply chains of Shein, who confirm that even though Shein is working to better and improve the qualities of the working conditions in the supply chain, nothing is really happening. It's so frustrating when you try to promise something and then people tend to remember. Awful. They also have a roadmap and I absolutely love this to bits, because who the fuck is gonna read this? A lot of the time what these pages are meant to do is not to actually tell consumers what's actually happening. It's usually just a bunch of very vague language. There are no third-party certifications and approvals or seals or labels. It's just a very trust me bro kind of process. It's really Shein monitoring Shein, and that is not trustworthy at all. But what these pages tend to do, and you can see the sort of our impact sustainability pages on basically every single company that's also the worst. Coca-Cola has this, H&M, Zara, Inditex, Temu, and Shein. What they seek to do is that when consumers go on this platform, they have heard tons about sustainability and fast fashion and that potentially being bad, so they look for proof that that doesn't happen here. And oftentimes they don't necessarily need very thorough proof in order to be reassured that this company is not a part of the problem. So they see something like a sustainability roadmap, or what was it called, a evolution roadmap. No, I'm not enjoying the wordplay whatsoever. And then think, oh, they put a lot of work and effort into this, when in fact it's just a task group with no external or third-party approval. So this really means very little. Extremely little. Let's move on. One of the pieces of advice that I've given many times when it comes to how to spot greenwashing is to look for numbers, documentation, any kind of solid evidence and proof. And oftentimes how you seek that out is by looking at concrete documentation and numbers. But that is also really easy to manufacture without actually making much of a difference. So this is a really good example of that. I will read some of these out loud to you because I absolutely love it. Under Planet, through collective action, we strive to decarbonize our supply chain, source responsible materials, and protect biodiversity and animal welfare. They're not really committed to this as much as they strive to do it. It's not really something you can hold them accountable for saying, because they might strive to do this. They just don't follow through with it. But that's what that is. Anyway, moving on. Here are some stats. 11% of our fiber portfolio for Shein branded products consisted of recycled polyester and forest-safe viscose. And this is supposed to be the flex. 11%. Hallelujah. Also, recycled material really isn't the biggest part of the impact of the supply chain of the products. It's the volume of clothing that they're producing. And the fact is, Shein was the highest emitting fast fashion company in 2023. It's the volume of clothing. That's the problem. Not whether or not the material is recycled. That actually has very little to do with the overall impact of clothes. This is also a really good one. 16.2% of packaging used for Shein branded products contained at least 50% GRS certified recycled PE plastic or was made from forest safe paper. 16.2% contained at least 50%. It's truly like they're trying with one finger. And 4.2 million unique users registered on Shein Exchange with over 150,000 pre-loved items. This sounds like a flex because we know sustainable equals secondhand pre-loved shopping. However, there's really no data to support that the increasing popularity of secondhand clothes is lowering the demand for new fast fashion to be made, which is why we're seeing fast fashion companies include secondhand options and secondhand platforms in addition to their regular fast fashion clothing. So this has also nothing to do with sustainability. It's another type of marketing scheme that sort of implements the idea that Shein is also good for the planet because you can buy some of it secondhand. And that's just not the case. 438,000 metric tons of emissions potentially saved through localization strategy and green logistics projects. Potentially. The reason why you see them stretching so much when it comes to actual concrete documentation and statistics is because the business model of these brands can never be sustainable. One of the things they've really doubled down on is the fact that they are more sustainable because they don't produce a lot of each item of clothing. Their business model is built on a what works and what doesn't work tactic, where they scan the internet for viral and on-trend styles, which means that they often, very often, end up stealing from small creators and designers, but that's a whole other pit of hell to open. What happens is that they produce so many different things to see what sticks and what doesn't. And that means that they only produce 100 or 200 or 50 products in this style, but then they produce thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands different styles to see what sticks. There is an angle in this that's often used as a greenwashing point because it's used to say, well, we are more sustainable than H&M or Zara because we produce 100 pieces of this style and they produce thousands and thousands. But their collections are much smaller and Shein's are much bigger. Also, quickly going back to the efforts regarding animal welfare. So it's really easy to say that you are animal or vegan friendly if you basically just produce polyester clothing. At least in the short haul, you are pretty animal welfare friendly because you don't really use any leather or fur, because those materials are typically more expensive than polyester. The vast majority of clothes today is made from synthetic fibers. The vast majority of fast fashion today is made from synthetic fibers, and Shein is no different. And once again, because they produce so much more clothing than basically any other fast fashion brand, they are using a lot of polyester. And polyester is based on fossil fuels. It's based on oil. it's just a fossil fuel derived material and product. And the reason why I say it's animal welfare friendly in the short haul, because if we look further into the horizon, the fossil fuel industry is one of the major causes for climate change. It's the biggest cause of climate change, and any kind of direct or byproduct from that industry is to blame for the biodiversity crisis, for the loss of natural habitats, and that is not necessarily pretty animal welfare friendly. So there is that. When I first saw this study about consumers shopping at Shein, thinking of themselves more so as environmentally friendly than other average consumers, I knew I had to talk about this. And every time I do, one of the first comments that I get is that, why are we hating so much on Shein when every other fast fashion brand is also doing this? And I think there's an interesting point to be made here, because sometimes we zoom in on specific brands or specific companies when we have to have much larger, much wider discussions, which we also have on this channel. You can also go find them. I am also giving shit to Zara and H&M and Topshop and ASOS. They are all operating on the same business model, but since Shein in 2023 was the highest emitting fast fashion company, I think there's a good point to be made that we need to even more so talk about this company, especially if some consumers think that they can be environmentally conscious while supporting them. Is there a point to be made that Shein is doing something that not a lot of other companies are doing? They're producing very cheap clothing and appealing to very poor communities, or people with low incomes, or people that experience difficulty when seeking for clothing that they can fit in their size. There are tons of these arguments going back and forth, and that demographic having trouble finding clothing that they can wear so they can be trendy, so they can be cute. I'm going to say something perhaps controversial, but I stand by it 100%. I grew up on very limited resources where we had to go to thrift shops because that was the only thing we could afford. Not capital around Copenhagen thrift shops, way up north thrift shops, cheap ass thrift stores before they got popular. And when we have that conversation, when we're excusing our consumption of fast fashion with the fact that that's the only way we can afford clothing, what we are continuously ignoring, what we're actually saying is that the everybody we're talking about is not actually everybody, because it completely excludes the amount, because that conversation completely excludes the, because that conversation completely excludes, because that conversation completely excludes the very impoverished communities that's being exploited by these fast fashion brands. One of my favorite things is hearing from people that fall under the very low income category and that also fall into the plus size category, and how they have chosen to still not buy Shein even though it's tempting or easy or convenient. So if you have similar experiences, please leave them down below to inspire others. There are secondhand stores, there are clothing swaps, and simply just buying less and reusing what we already have is tons better than buying from Shein. One thing that I would like to add, however, I posted this on a reel as well, and one of the very first things that came up in the comments was that I assume these are very young, very uneducated, very ignorant, naive consumers that think this way. So another survey I think it's important to link to this is one done by Sustainable Fashion Forum that showed that the average Shein shopper is a 35-year-old woman making roughly $65,000 a year and who spends about $100 a month on clothing. Based on this, I think it's often a little bit of a cop-out of the conversation when we instantly start talking about, well, what about people of poverty? What about people on low income? And what about people on budgets? Because if those were the only ones who shopped at Shein, it wouldn't be a problem. This platform is made to make us overconsume. The business model is designed to make us buy more than we need. If we only bought what we needed, and if only people that actually needed this kind of platform used it, it wouldn't be a problem. Actually, it wouldn't even exist. It exists and it thrives because people who don't actually need it is using it. Because people spending $100 a month on clothing could easily afford to do otherwise, or to spend their money more wisely, or to support smaller, more sustainable brands that actually produce less and use better materials. But no matter where you shop from, it's not going to be sustainable if you don't actually need it. So the best thing that we can do for the planet when it comes to how we consume clothing is by consuming less. We wearing what we already have and respecting the materials that we have, which means taking care of them, maintaining them, and repairing them when they break. It is not a human right to be able to afford cheap and trendy clothing. We got around in this video. I just really wanted to share this new piece of information about how greenwashing is working and how it's even more so important that we talk about greenwashing, that we push for higher standards for the companies, and that we vote with these sort of issues in mind, so that we have a political landscape, we have the political tools and the legislation to keep these companies in check and acting in any sort of ways just slightly less damaging to the environment. But the best thing that we can do is to not support them. Supporting them even though you don't kind of like them will get us absolutely nowhere. The best thing we can do is just to boycott altogether and to talk about the fact that these issues exist. Anyway, I hope that you liked this video. If you did, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. And if there are any other topics, issues, phenomena that you would like for me to talk about on this channel, leave a comment down below and let's go through it. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!